back to my channel. It is November, which means that there are only 2 months to read this year, and I have a lot left to read. But today we're going to talk about all the books that I read in October and go over each one of them and give you guys a short little review. I read a couple of the books that are on my 23 classics in 2023 video. That was a goal. I had to read 23 books this year, but my overall goal is to read 110. So those are kind of like my two goals, and the classics that I read I feel like aren't actually classic books. They were on that video though, so those are the ones that I'm reading, and I'm going to review a couple of them today. So this month actually started out pretty terrible, and I think the first few books are 2-star reviews, but by the end I got a 5-star book. So there's some good, some bad this month. So the first one that I read was Counting the Cost by Jill Duggar. I listened to this one, and I was kind of interested to read this one, but I didn't really have high hopes for it because I've seen her attitude online and in the recent documentary that was made, and I knew that she didn't have a very godly attitude towards her family in this whole situation. And so I knew that I wouldn't really necessarily like the book that much, but it was a little bit more disappointing than I expected, especially because the beginning was not terrible, but then it really went downhill. So in my review on Goodreads, I'll link it down below, but I just tried to talk about the fact that, you know, there's always two sides to the story. So yes, it is true that Jill had a hard childhood, that her dad did sin against her, and his treatment of her even into adulthood. And she was in a cult that distorted the gospel. However, she still sinned in her treatment towards her family, especially of her dad, and also her disregard for God and the truth. And she was in a bad situation, and she had two paths that she could take, either the right godly response or to completely turn away from that stuff and not have a right response. And I think that she did not have a godly response in this. So the book started out interesting, just recounting her life of growing up on TV, which reading it was just like, wow, this is a lot harder than you would think that it is. We just enjoy watching it, but then you realize just how hard it is to do all of that filming, and you realize just kind of the evils of like being in that film industry. But obviously, you know, the family shows that. But quickly it turned into just blaming her parents, and yes, it was her parents' fault, a lot of it, but it was the victim mentality that really bothered me, that showed through. So the biblical response to everything that she went through would be to make these godly biblical responses for her own family, use the counsel of her pastor, of biblical counselors, and just move on from those mistakes. But instead, she made decisions just purely based off of the, well, I don't see anything wrong with doing this. So, like, for example, wearing pants or drinking alcohol, things she wasn't allowed to do growing up. And in the book, she didn't present like a good biblical reason why she was convinced that she should wear pants and that it should be okay. It was just well, my family was in a cult, I wasn't allowed to do it, therefore I want to be different than that, and I'm just gonna wear pants. And actually that scene was just really hard for me to read because she seemed very disrespectful of her husband in that section. She was going through the scene of how she asked her husband, do you think it's okay if I should wear pants? And she just made him seem very uninterested and like he wasn't leading her very well. So maybe that's just the writing, but I didn't really like reading that in the book. So she really just wants to be celebrated for sending her kid to public school, for getting a nose ring, for wearing pants. And it just didn't seem like she was convinced fully of those things, which makes me think that she was sinning against her conscience, because the way she said it was that like she did those things and was basically hiding them because she felt so ashamed to be like wearing pants out in public. But really she just wanted some acceptance from people and just to be applauded for the way that she was being different. And I've seen people do this in real life, that just this whole deconstruction idea, and you really just want to be a victim and make your own decisions, and you want everyone to applaud you for it. So really, I took out of this book that the Duggar family needs a lot of biblical counseling on the gospel of forgiveness and peacemaking, and it will definitely be well loved by any deconstructionist who wants to lump all kind of Christianity together, whether it's a cult or whether it's true Christianity. They just want to take all of Christianity and throw it in the trash. So I do think after reading this that I do want to read Ginger's book because I know that she presents a way better view of this, and she does turn to the true gospel. Okay, I talked a long time for that one just because it made me so angry as I was reading it, but I'll be quicker on the other ones. So the next book I read was Coming Up for Air by George Orwell. This book has actually been, was the oldest book on my want to read on Goodreads. I don't know why I put it on there. I don't have any friends currently who have read this book, so I don't know what made me want to read it, but it's been on there for a long time. So I found it at Half Price Books and started reading it this month. It was not the top of my list. Don't love it. Basically the moral of the book is don't idolize your childhood and don't try to recreate it. So he has this idyllic childhood. He goes through most of the book kind of recounting it, and then he decides that his life is just so terrible right now and he wants to go back to his hometown and just kind of relive everything. Lo and behold, he goes back and nothing is the same and no one remembers him, and no one even thinks that his father, who owned this shop in town, was even a remarkable person. And so he's very disappointed and just kind of goes back to his mundane life, very disappointed. So good lesson maybe, but not worth it to read the book. It just really was about depression. It had a lot of language in it, like light language, but still there was just so much of it. And lots of mentions / desires of adultery. So thumbs down for this one. I didn't really expect much from Orwell, but you know. Also, there is a fade to black scene in the woods that is similar to 1984 if you've read that. Next is a book that I listened to, For Such a Time by Kate Breslin. This is one of the 3 new Christian fiction authors that I read in the last month or so, and I will do a video comparing all 3 of these. This one is about a Jewess Hadassah who falls in love with a Nazi. I don't remember what his name was. The one thing that I did like about this book, I gave it 2 stars. So here's the good that I found from this book. I loved the parallels to Esther in the Bible, and just seeing the Assyrian captivity history compared with the Jewish Holocaust, and also just comparing it to recent events that have happened. I found that really fascinating. Yeah, it just made me think about how culture after culture has disrespected God's people and sought to destroy them, often with the same exact tactics, but just seeing that God has preserved them is pretty cool. However, that is pretty much all I liked about this book. First of all, if I was Hadassah's biblical counselor, here is what I would tell her, along with a whole bunch of other stuff. But I would definitely counsel her that she needs to kill those fleshly desires that she has for a man who is evil and completely in sin. In the end, is he redeemed and do they have a great relationship? Sure. By the way, this is going to be kind of a lot of spoilers just because the book is hard not to spoil. But in the end, it was cool. But throughout, she is pursuing this relationship with a man who is clearly not a believer and clearly does not care about killing people. So she really should have gotten rid of those desires and just been done with that. Second, also, this is one of those books where it's like very intense moment. We're all going to die. But wow, you have really nice lips. Maybe we should kiss. Oh, whoops, we just died. And I'm not joking. This is quite literally. So spoiler warning, he dies, but he doesn't, because they took way too long to get out of this very desperate situation. Also, one thing that I didn't like is just as an author, you should really write books that have happy endings, because especially as Christians, that is what we desire. We desire a happy ending because we know that Jesus is going to redeem all things at the end. And to read a book where they come out of the frying pan very desperately and just almost miraculously, and you're so happy, and then they literally jump straight into the fire, that is not a book I want to read. So I will not read any more of her books. I know the other ones, could possibly be good. You guys might possibly like some of her other books, but this one is just really disappointing, and I don't see myself picking up any more of her books. Again, for cleanliness, I gave it a 1 out of 5 rating, just because there was so much kissing. There was mentions of mistress, more kissing, desire, more kissing, taking someone to bed, also more kissing, death, shooting, beatings. You get the picture. So, not one that I like. Next one I read was One Day in the Life of Ivan Denisovich. Finally, we get a 4-star book. So this is about one day in the life of this man who is in the Gulag. Well, not specifically the Gulag, but in a Russian work camp. I did really enjoy this. I liked the style of writing, and it does have a lot of language in it. Just know that my copy is nicely censored by my mom, who read it first. So if anyone wants to borrow it, here you go, you can have this one. It is really good. I am just so fascinated by the Russian culture and by Russian books. That's one genre, if you want to call it, that I really enjoy reading. So if you haven't read anything Russian, I would recommend that you read this one just because it is shorter and a lot of the Russian books are pretty long, and you will get a good idea of what Russian literature is like. Also, I would recommend reading the introduction because it's a very good introduction, and listening to the Close Read podcast that they did on this. It really just gave me a better picture of what was going on and kind of solidified like what was happening in the book. The only thing that I didn't love in here is that I didn't feel terribly appalled at the conditions of the camp. And I don't know if that's just because I read so many Holocaust books. I had just finished a Holocaust book right before this, but it just didn't seem as horrible as like a concentration camp. And I don't know if that's just me or if that's the writing in the book just didn't make it seem bad. Also, this particular day that the author chooses to write about is a day where pretty much everything goes right and he gets lots of extra food, and I don't know, it just seems like it went well and there wasn't some like horrible thing to complain about. But that was my only complaint about it. Definitely my favorite part, if you've read this, is the working scene in here where he's building this wall, and it just feels so like accomplished as you're reading it. You're there with him doing the work, and you feel like you're working so fast and you're so efficient. So I really appreciated that. As far as cleanliness, I gave this a 3 out of 5 stars. There is a lot of language, quite strong language. But again, if you can find a censored copy, that's really great. And there's pretty much no romance in here. I think that's one of the points of the book, is that there's not really any pleasure for him in this world of cold work. So the only thing to look out for is the language. And then I read Orbiting Jupiter by Gary D. Schmidt. I had seen this recommended a while ago. My mom read it. It is like 170 something pages, but everyone in my family who's read it has read it pretty much in one night, just because of the way it's written is just quick. It's kind of short sentences, but it keeps you engaged and you kind of want to see like what comes out of the story. It is about a foster kid and their family. So the foster kid almost killed the teacher. He was incarcerated at a place called Stone Mountain, and he has a daughter named Jupiter who he's never seen. I found this to be a really sweet story, but it does have a very shocking climax, but a very sweet denouement. So, I don't know. I ended up giving it 3 stars just because I liked the way it was written. I thought it did have a sweet ending, but also it had a tragic ending. So it's kind of, I don't know. It's one of those books that you hate so much that you like it, almost, because you know the writing's good if you hate it that much. So, I don't know. As far as cleanliness, I gave it 3 out of 5 for teen pregnancy. There's mention of drugs, and there's a couple of crude jokes in there, I believe. Then I listened to Positively Penelope by Pepper Basham. If you were here probably about 6 months ago, I read Authentically Izzy, and this series is a romance series. It's Christian, but it's told through emails, not letters, but emails and text, and then there's a little bit of actual narrative that happens. I really like that format, and every time I read books like this, it makes me want to write emails or letters, just because it makes you slow down and actually talk about what happens throughout your day. So I think I would probably give this like 3.5 stars. In the beginning, I liked it a lot more than I liked Authentically Izzy. I felt like there was just more depth to the story. I related more to Penelope and just her positiveness and kind of naivety. Like she's pretty young and she's trying to, you know, have this business and has her dreams of her fairy tale relationship and wedding, and I liked that better. And also I feel like the male lead was a lot more realistic in this one than Brody from Authentically Izzy. If you've read it, you know that he's pretty much too perfect, which is kind of annoying to read. And also Luke, again, if you've read my review for Authentically Izzy, Luke was the star of the show. He's the brother, and he's just the sweetest brother ever, and just always there to listen and to help, and he reminds me a lot of one of my brothers, and I just love the relationship that they have. So in this book, Penelope goes to Skimar to help this struggling theater, and she meets this grumpy single father, which I really do like the grumpy and sunshine trope, so I thought that was neat. And of course, the relationship gets off on the wrong foot, but he has the most adorable little girl, which the narrator in these books are pretty amazing because she can do all the voices if it's only one person. I forgot to check that, but it's really good, except for the little girl, I really hated her narrator or her voice for that. But Matt has the most dashing brother, Alec, and also you should not judge a book by its cover or a man by his charm. And I'll let you read the book if you would like to figure out the rest of the story, but the majority of the book is told through these emails and these texts, and you have like the main plot of trying to fix this theater and bring it back to life, and that made it just a lot more interesting than a simple romance book. Like there was actually a story to it, not just two people meeting each other. The reason why I rated it 3 stars is because the first half of the book I was pleasantly surprised there was very little actual romance, as if you've seen any of my videos, most Christian fiction books have, which is very annoying. But once you get half to about 3/4 of the way through, it starts. She couldn't leave it out of the book. So once Penelope begins to fall in love, you get all the thoughts of, will he please kiss me? Wow, this is amazing. Can we do it again? Can we not, please? And even though this is considered Christian fiction, I felt like the Christianity was very light in this book, and there was one comment where she said praying is not for everyone, and I strongly disagree with that, because everyone should be praying, and if they're not, then people should be praying for them so that they are saved. So that felt very universalistic, kind of like all roads lead to heaven kind of thing. So cleanliness, I gave it 3 out of 5 just because of all the kissing in there. But I did really like the storyline, and it was magical, and all the references to musicals and all that stuff was really fun. Okay, 2 more books. Jules Verne, Paris in the 20th Century. I ended up giving this 3 stars. This was a lost manuscript that they found of Jules Verne that he wrote 100 years before the book takes place. So it was his predictions for what Paris would look like in the 1960s. A lot of his stuff is spot on, and I did enjoy that. However, all the details get very dry, and you can tell that it's an unfinished novel, and I got really bored at parts, and I felt like there was just too many details. So I wouldn't necessarily recommend this unless you really like reading these kinds of predictions of the future books. And Goodreads did not save the review that I wrote for it yesterday. Cleanliness, I think it's good. I don't think there's anything in it. And I really liked the kind of like the budding relationship between 2 of the characters was really funny and just like stereotypical what was happening. The ending is extremely depressing and extremely abrupt, and that is why mostly I do not like this book, because of the ending. And then the next book is Reformation Women by Rebecca Van Duderwood. I did end up giving this 5 stars, and if you want to see a more detailed review, go see the last video that I posted, because I talked about this, but I really enjoyed it and loved learning about all the different people in here. So in conclusion, in the month of October, I read 8 books and 2,134 pages. So not my best month ever, but I'm getting there, and I only have 27 books to read before the end of the year, and I'm listening to lots and trying to read classics and just enjoying my reading. So let me know down below in the comments what your favorite book was that you read in the month of October, and maybe I will pick it up and read it. One last announcement: if you guys are interested in reading this book, Tales from the Perilous Realm by J.R.R. Tolkien, go over to Instagram, and I am going to be doing a reading group on there for anyone who wants to read this before the end of the year. We'll read about 40 pages a week and discuss it on Instagram, so I'm looking forward to reading this, and hope you guys will join me. I will see you back here on YouTube next week. Bye!